Lysra sat alone in the quiet library dome of Oralis, her fingers moving gently over the glowing text of an ancient scroll. The words spoke of a time when a strange race called humans walked among the stars. Creatures of courage and chaos who built empires, fought wars, and vanished without a trace. To her they were stories, nothing more. Tales told to frighten children or inspire young scholars like her to dream of bravery in a peaceful age. No one truly believed they ever existed. She looked out through the dome's glass ceiling. The night sky was calm, filled with silver stars and drifting clouds of violet light. Oralis had not seen war for generations. Its people lived by harmony, logic, and peace. Lysra loved her world. Yet something inside her often felt hollow, as if peace had cost her people something they could not name. Her mentor once told her that humans were violent beasts who destroyed their own world. But when she read the old stories, they sounded different. She read about humans who stood between darkness and the weak. Humans who fought not because they loved war, but because they couldn't bear to see others suffer. She liked those parts. They made her wonder if maybe the stories were written by those who admired them secretly. Every week, Lysra traveled to the archives to study what little remained from the lost age of Earth. There were fragments, half-burned data chips, broken signals, and sometimes voices recorded before everything ended. Most were corrupted, just static and whispers. But tonight something changed. As she was going through an old frequency file, the screen flickered. The audio was broken, full of static, but she heard a man's voice, deep, steady, and calm. Just one phrase came through clearly, "Hold the line." The sound made her heart race. It was not the voice of a monster. It was tired, human, and full of quiet strength. She replayed it again and again. Each time she felt something stir inside her. The signal was old, maybe centuries, but how could it suddenly reappear now? She rushed to the observatory center, her data pad clutched in "Hold the line." The tone was too clear, too alive to be ancient. She felt something calling to her curiosity, something deeper than logic or reason. By morning, she made her decision. She would go there. Her friends laughed when she told them. "Lysra, you'll find dust and silence, not humans," they said. But she packed her research gear anyway and requested a small transport shuttle. She told the council she was going to study radiation echoes. It wasn't entirely a lie. There would be echoes. She was sure of it, but maybe echoes of something greater. The journey to Valen took 2 days. The closer she got, the darker space became. Broken satellites drifted like silent ghosts, and the outpost loomed ahead, gray, cracked, and half-buried in asteroid dust. Her ship's landing gear touched the ground with a heavy thud. She stepped out, her boots sinking into the soft dust. The air smelled of metal and rust. Silence stretched in every direction. The only sound was the soft hum of her oxygen mask. She felt small beneath the vast ruined sky. Lysra activated her scanner. The readings were strange. Energy signatures faint but recent, maybe only a few days old. That was impossible. No one had been here for years. As she walked deeper into the base, she saw scorch marks on walls, signs of battle. Blaster burns, and footprints, large, deep prints unlike any Aurelian foot. She knelt down, tracing one with her finger. It was long, with a heavy heel. Human. Her pulse quickened. Could it be? The corridor ahead was dark. Her light flickered as she moved, revealing collapsed crates and scattered helmets. At the far end, behind a fallen door, she saw something shining. A dull, metallic object resting against the wall. When she came closer, she froze. It was a sword. Not a ceremonial blade, but real metal, scratched and scarred. Who would bring such a primitive weapon to space? She reached out, her hands trembling, and touched the hilt. It was warm, then she heard a sound. A soft breath. She turned quickly, her light sweeping across the wreckage, and there he was. A man sat slumped against the wall, his armor scorched black, one hand resting weakly beside the sword. His hair was dark and messy, his face pale but calm. He opened his eyes slowly, looked at her, and spoke in a rough, weary voice. "You're not with them." Lysra stepped back, unable to breathe. The stories, the myths, the legends all stood before her, alive. The human blinked, his gaze steady even in pain. "Good," he said faintly. "Then maybe there's still hope." Lysra didn't know what to say. She stared, her heart pounding. All her life she had studied stories. But now, for the first time, she wasn't reading history. She was standing inside it. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "You're human?" The man gave a weak, tired smile. "Last I checked," he whispered. His voice was hoarse but steady. the kind of tone that carried both exhaustion and quiet strength. Lysera moved closer slowly, afraid that he might vanish if she blinked. "How? You're supposed to be gone, extinct." "Yeah," he said softly, looking up at the ruined ceiling. "We heard that story too." He tried to sit up, but his body protested. Lysera knelt quickly beside him. She could see burns across his arms, strange marks she couldn't identify. She reached for her medical scanner and began running it over his chest. The readings confused her. The man's body was running hotter than any known species she'd studied. His heart rate strong but irregular. "You shouldn't move," she said, her voice small. "I've been through worse," he muttered, but when he tried again, he winced. "Okay, maybe not today." She helped him sit against a piece of broken metal, carefully supporting his shoulder. Up close, she noticed his eyes again, tired but alive, full of something she couldn't describe. Maybe courage, maybe sadness. She realized he was watching her just as closely. "You're not from this outpost," he said. "No," she replied quickly. "I'm from Oralis. I study ancient species. I came because of a signal. I thought it was impossible." He gave a small, humorless chuckle. "You heard my transmission?" "Yes, you said." "Hold the line." He blinked as if the word surprised him. "That was a distress call." "Didn't expect anyone to answer." Lysera looked around the room. The walls were scorched. There were holes where gunfire had hit. "What happened here?" He looked down at his sword beside him. "Raiders," he said simply. "They hit our convoy while we were escorting a refugee group. I tried to lead them away. Didn't go as planned." She stared at the blade. "You fought them with this?" He smiled faintly. "Nice to meet you, Lysera. You saved me a bit of trouble. I thought I was going to die talking to the walls." Her cheeks warmed. "I'm only doing what anyone would do. Not everyone would land on a dead world for a ghost story," he replied. And there was that tired smile again. For a moment, they both sat in silence, listening to the low hum of distant machinery still running somewhere deep in the outpost. The air was cool and heavy with dust. Lysera checked her scanner again. "Your armor, it's old." "Centuries old. How did you survive this long?" Garen looked thoughtful. "We adapted. Some of us went into cryosleep. Some never woke up. I got lucky." His words made her shiver. It was like hearing someone speak from a different age, a time of storms and fire. She looked around again, then back at him. "This place isn't safe. If those raiders return, we can't stay here." He nodded slowly. "Agreed, but I can barely walk right now." Lysera thought for a moment. "There's a small research shuttle outside. It's not strong, but it can take us to orbit. Maybe there we can send for help." Garen glanced at her with that quiet, assessing gaze again. "You'd risk that for me? For a human?" She hesitated. "You're alive. That's reason enough." For a second, he said nothing. Then he gave a slow nod. "All right, scholar. Let's move before the vultures circle back." To life, and the ship rumbled softly. Garen looked out the window. "Never thought I'd see stars again." Lysera smiled slightly. "Maybe you weren't meant to vanish." He turned his head toward her. "Maybe no one ever truly does." As the shuttle lifted off, the ruins of Valine grew smaller below them. Lysera felt a strange mix of fear and wonder. A few hours ago, she had come to study a myth. Now she was flying beside it. Garen closed his eyes as they rose through the thin atmosphere. "You said your people study the past?" "Yes," she said softly. "Then remember this," he murmured. "The stories about us, some of them are true, just not the ones written in fear." Lysera looked at him, her heart full of questions she didn't know how to ask. For the first time in her life, she felt she was standing at the edge of something vast, something that could change everything her world believed. And as the stars stretched before them, she wondered what other truths might still be waiting, lost among the stars. Lysera guided the shuttle through the dark void of space, her hands steady on the controls though her heart still raced. She had spent her entire life studying myths and broken records, and now one of those legends sat beside her, real and breathing. Garen Hale, the human warrior. He looked out the window silently as stars drifted past, his expression distant. The dim cabin light reflected off the scars on his armor. She wanted to ask him everything at once, about Earth, about the wars, about how he had survived, but she didn't want to push him. He looked like a man who had seen too much. Still, curiosity burned inside her like fire. Finally, she asked softly, "What was Earth like?" He turned his head slightly, a faint smile tugging at his tired face. Blue. Karis Lauda alive, it was home, was? She asked. He nodded slowly. We lost it. Not because of weakness, but because we refused to stop fighting for others. That's what humans do. Sometimes it destroys us, sometimes it saves us. Lysera listened carefully, her eyes wide. She had always read about humans as dangerous and unpredictable. But this man spoke with gentleness, like someone who had carried too much weight for too long. What happened to the rest of your kind? She asked quietly. Garen sighed, the sound heavy. After the Great War, we scattered. Some went underground. Some took ships into deep space. We called it the Long Exile. I was part of the Terran Defense Command. My duty was to protect the last colonies, and now? He looked down at his hand resting on the sword lying across his lap. Now I don't even know if there's anyone left to protect. Lysera felt a lump in her throat. She couldn't imagine such loneliness drifting through centuries while your world turned to dust. She wanted to say something comforting but couldn't find the right words. Instead, she asked, "Why do you still carry that sword? You could build new weapons, right?" Garen ran a finger along the blade's edge. A sword doesn't run out of charge. It doesn't need power. It reminds me of what we are, close to the fight, never hiding behind machines. When everything else fails, we still have our hands, our will. His words made her shiver. It wasn't a threat, it was something else, something proud. She realized that for him, this weapon was more than metal. It was history, memory, and promise. After a long silence, Garen said, "You came here looking for ghosts." "Why?" Lysera hesitated. "Because I wanted to know if the stories were true, I think. I wanted to believe that courage like that once existed, that it wasn't just a dream." He studied her face for a moment. "Courage isn't gone, Lysera. It just sleeps in people who think peace means safety." His voice carried a quiet strength, and she felt small beside him, not because of fear, but because of the weight of what he represented. Hours passed as they traveled through the emptiness. Lysera set the ship on a stable course toward a nearby relay station to send a report. Garen rested, though even in sleep his body remained tense, as if ready to wake at any moment. When they reached the station, Lysera sent a coded message to Oralis, saying she had found evidence of pre-war human artifacts. She didn't mention the living man. She wasn't sure the Council would react kindly to that news. After transmitting the message, she turned back to find Garen awake again, looking at the holographic stars projected on the console. "That's your home system?" he asked, pointing to a faint blue mark labeled Oralis Sector. "Yes," she said. "It's a peaceful world. We don't even have a standing army." He raised an eyebrow. "That's not always a good thing." Lysera frowned slightly. "We've been safe for centuries." "Until something comes knocking," he replied. "Peace without defense is only waiting for someone else's decision." She didn't argue. His tone wasn't harsh, just honest. He spoke from the kind of experience that couldn't be taught. After some time, she brought out food capsules and handed him one. He examined it, laughed quietly, and said, "You call this food? Humans would have called this punishment." She smiled for the first time since finding him. "It's nutritious." He took a bite, made a face, and said, "Still tastes like regret." Lysera laughed softly. The sound seemed to ease something in him. For a while, the silence that followed was gentle. Then Garen leaned back and looked at her again. "You know, Lysera, you didn't just find a human. You found the last soldier of the old world. Everything I was meant to protect is gone." Her smile faded. "Maybe not everything. You're still here. Maybe that means something." He tilted his head, thinking. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just a story waiting to end properly. Before she could answer, a sharp beeping sound filled the cockpit. Her sensors flashed red. Lysera checked the readings, multiple ships approaching from the far side of the asteroid belt. Her heart jumped. Pirates. The same ones who attacked the outpost. Garen's expression hardened. "Then they tracked your signal." She tried to steer away, but the small shuttle wasn't built for combat. The enemy ships grew closer on the radar. "We can't fight them," she said in panic. "We have no weapons." Garen slowly stood, wincing as he reached for his sword. "Then we don't fight them your way." Lysera looked at him, frightened but trusting. There was something unshakable in his eyes, something ancient and human. He touched her shoulder gently. "Keep the ship steady. Whatever happens, don't stop moving." Lysera nodded, her breath trembling. As the pirate ships closed in, the faint hum of Garen's sword filled the cabin. It wasn't a machine sound, it was human will turned into metal. And in that moment, Lysera understood why the universe once feared and admired his kind. Humans didn't vanish. Lysera's heart pounded as the radar beeped faster. The pirate ships were closing in, 3 of them, fast and armed. Her shuttle shook under the first blast, a flash of red light streaking past the hull. She tried to steady the controls, but her hands trembled. The shields were weak, barely strong enough for small debris, not weapons. Garen stood beside her seat, his body swaying slightly with the movement of the ship. One hand resting on the wall, the other gripping his sword. "They've locked onto us," Lysera said, her voice shaking. "Then we change the rules," Garen said quietly. His eyes were sharp, calm, and focused. "Can you take us closer to that large asteroid?" Lysera looked at the screen. "The one with the broken ridge?" "Yes, but it's dangerous. The field around it's unstable." "Perfect," he said. "They'll follow. And I'll give them something to think about." She didn't understand what he meant, but she trusted him. Somehow she already did. She pulled the ship toward the asteroid belt. The pirate vessels followed, their engines glowing bright. Each time one fired, Garen's voice came steady behind her, giving directions like a commander born for chaos. "Angle 40 degrees left. Drop altitude now, good." The shuttle slipped between rocks and spinning debris. Lysera gasped as a glowing fragment grazed past the window, but Garen didn't even flinch. He moved with quiet certainty, like someone who had danced through death before. Finally, one of the pirate ships came too close. Garen pressed a button on the side panel. "Hold this course," he said, opening the small cargo door. Lysera turned to him. "What are you doing?" "Buying you time." He stepped toward the open hatch, wind from the vacuum barrier humming around him. The stars reflected on his cracked armor. He looked at her once and smiled faintly. "You wanted to see a human warrior." "Don't blink." Before she could speak, he leapt out, her mind froze. Through the rear monitor, she saw him land on the pirate ship's outer hull like a shadow. The ship twisted violently, trying to shake him off, but he moved fast, cutting through metal panels with his sword. Sparks flew into the void. Within seconds, the pirate ship veered away, smoke venting from its side. The other 2 ships broke formation, firing wildly. Lysera swerved the shuttle out of their range, panic and awe mixing inside her. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. A single man without armor plating or heavy weapons was fighting machines built for destruction. Minutes later, one of the ships exploded in silence, light blooming across the dark. Garen's figure drifted free, then caught onto the next vessel with a cable from his suit. The second ship panicked, spinning away before colliding with a rock. Only one pirate ship remained. It turned and fled, its engines blazing into the distance. Lysera pulled the shuttle closer to the drifting man. "Garen!" she called into the comms, her voice trembling. His voice came back steady and calm, though he sounded tired. "Still here?" "Don't worry, Scholar. I've done worse dances." She laughed in disbelief, relief washing over her. "You're insane." "Humans are good at that," he replied. When she brought him back aboard, he staggered slightly, his breathing heavy but steady. His armor was scraped, and part of his shoulder plate had melted away, but his eyes were alive. He looked out the window where debris drifted slowly, the battle already turning into silence. Lysera stared at him, speechless. "How did you do that?" He shrugged lightly. "Training, and a lot of luck." "No," she said softly. "That wasn't luck. You fought like—" She paused, searching for words. "Like something from another world." He looked at her, serious now. "From another time, maybe. But not another world. Just human." Those words stayed in her mind as they drifted through quiet space. Garen began repairing parts of his armor with simple tools, humming softly to himself. Lysera sat across from him, still trying to process what she had seen. "You risked your life," she said. He nodded. "That's what we do." "For a stranger?" "For someone who believes," he said. "That's enough." His calm made her chest tighten. She wanted to ask him why. Why someone like him still fought when there was no home left, no army to return to, but his face held a peace that needed no answer. Later, as they approached a nearby moon to rest, Lysera noticed a faint mark etched onto his sword. "What does that symbol mean?" she asked. Garen looked at it for a moment. "The oath of the last regiment," he said. "Before Earth fell, every surviving human soldier took it. We swore to protect any peaceful world we found. No flag, no reward, just the promise." Lysera touched the symbol gently. "You kept it," he smiled faintly. "Someone has to." They landed on the moon's quiet surface. A soft light from distant stars reflected off the white dust. Lysera stepped outside for a moment, the cool stillness surrounding her. Garen followed, standing silently beside her. She looked at him and whispered, "The stories were wrong about you. They said humans destroyed everything they touched." He stared at the horizon. "Sometimes we did. But we also built. We loved, we protected. They only remember the fire, not the hands that carried the water." Lysera felt her throat tighten. The man beside her wasn't a monster or a myth. He was proof that courage and compassion could live in the same heart. She turned toward him. "What will you do now?" Garen glanced up at the stars. "The signal you found, it might not be the last. If I'm alive, maybe others are too. I'll find them." She hesitated, then said, "You don't have to do it alone." The promise?" she asked softly. "The oath of the last regiment," he said, tightening a screw on his armor. "When the Terran colonies fell, every surviving human soldier swore to protect any peaceful species we found. No home left to defend, no world to call our own, but we could make sure others didn't suffer the same end." Lysera listened quietly. His words carried something her people had forgotten. Duty, even without reward. "You still live by that oath?" He smiled faintly. "It's all I have left." They stayed like that for a while, the hum of the shuttle the only sound. Lysera thought about her world, about Oralis, a place that prided itself on peace yet feared the very courage that had allowed others to survive. Her council had called humans dangerous. But sitting beside one now, she wondered if maybe danger wasn't the same as strength. Later, they shared a simple meal, ration packs from Lysera's supply box. Garen laughed when he saw them again. "Still tastes like regret," he said, biting one with a grin. Lysera smiled. "You humans and your strange humor. We needed it," he said. "When the world burns, you either cry or laugh." Laughter hurts less, that made her quiet again. She thought about what he'd lost, his people, his world, his time. Yet he still smiled. After a while, she turned to him. "When we return to Oralis, the council will want to meet you. They'll ask questions. Some won't believe you're real." "I don't blame them," Garen said. "If I were them, I'd call me a myth too." "They're not kind to myths," she whispered. "They fear anything that reminds them of war." He looked at her gently. "Then we'll show them peace doesn't mean weakness." Lysera nodded, though she wasn't sure how. She could already imagine the council's faces, the fear, the disbelief, the judgment. But she wasn't going to let them bury this truth. Humanity wasn't gone. It had simply endured. The next day they left the moon and set course for Oralis. The journey took several hours. Garen spent most of it staring at the stars, lost in thought. Lysera wondered what he saw when he looked out there. Home, or just emptiness. When they entered Oralis orbit, Lysera sent a coded message to the council tower, announcing her return. The reply came quickly. She was to report immediately. The capital city shimmered below, its crystal towers glowing blue under the morning sun. Garen watched from the window as they descended. "Peaceful world," he murmured. "You can feel it," Lysera smiled faintly. "We've forgotten what war feels like." "Then you've also forgotten what it costs to keep peace," he said quietly. They landed on the council platform surrounded by guards. Lysera stepped out first, holding her research tablet tightly. The guards froze when Garen followed. His tall figure, scarred armor, and the long sword at his back drew immediate whispers. One of the guards raised a scanner. "Identify yourself." Garen stood calmly. "Captain Garen Hale, Terran Defense Command." The guard frowned, clearly confused. "Terran? What?" Lysera stepped forward quickly. "He's with me. He's the last survivor of the human race." The words rippled through the gathered officials like a wave. The guards lowered their weapons slightly, uncertain what to do. The council hall doors opened and a voice called them inside. The council chamber was bright and vast. 12 elder figures sat around a glowing circle of light. They looked down at Lysera and Garen as if studying an impossible artifact. "Scholar Lysera," the High Chancellor said, his voice echoing. "You bring us strange news." "Explain yourself." Lysera stepped forward. "The myths are true. Humans were not extinct. I found one at the Velen outpost. His name is Garen Hale." The council members murmured among themselves. One elder leaned forward. "You claim this creature is human. Yet history shows humanity destroyed itself through war. Garen spoke for the first time, his voice deep and steady. Then your history only remembers the ending, not the reasons. All eyes turned to him. He met their gazes without fear. You speak of us as monsters, but you're alive because beings like us stood between chaos and your ancestors. We fought so others could live. The hall fell silent. Even the High Chancellor seemed uncertain. You expect us to believe one man represents an entire extinct species? Garen's jaw tightened. No, I'm not asking for belief. I'm here because one of your people cared enough to listen. He looked at Lysera. That's all it takes sometimes, one person who believes. The council whispered again, uneasy. Lysera felt anger rising in her chest. He saved me. He saved lives at Velen. He's not a danger. He's proof that humanity's courage still exists. The Chancellor looked between them. Courage often becomes violence when fear returns. We cannot risk awakening what nearly destroyed the galaxy. Garen didn't reply. He only stood there, silent and strong. The Chancellor nodded to the guards. For now, he will remain under watch until we decide. Lysera turned to protest, but Garen placed a hand on her shoulder gently. It's all right, he said quietly. Fear is natural. Let them see before they decide. As he was escorted away, Lysera felt something ache deep inside her. The man who had fought to save others was now treated as a relic, a threat from another age. But in Garen's calm expression, she saw something else. A quiet confidence. He wasn't afraid of their judgment. He had seen far worse. And as the great doors closed between them, Lysera made herself a silent promise. She would make them see what she saw. That the human warrior wasn't a ghost from a violent past. He was a reminder of everything brave and good her people had forgotten. Lysera could not sleep that night. The city outside her window glowed softly under the twin moons, peaceful and quiet as always. But her mind refused to rest. The image of Garen being led away by the guards haunted her. He hadn't resisted. He hadn't even looked angry. He had simply nodded and told her, "It's all right." Yet it wasn't. Nothing about it was right. She sat by the window, replaying the council meeting in her mind. Their fear had been stronger than their curiosity. To them, Garen wasn't a man. He was a warning from the past, a living reminder of what they wanted to forget. But Lysera knew the truth. Humanity's strength wasn't in its wars. It was in its will to protect, even when the world turned against it. At dawn, she walked to the central archives and accessed restricted files. She wanted to know everything about the last recorded encounters with humans. Most of the documents were fragments, half erased or rewritten to fit the council's story. They had hidden the truth. The old records described humans not as destroyers, but as defenders. Soldiers who stood their ground when others ran. Engineers who rebuilt cities after battles. Doctors who treated the wounded of every species. Lysera closed her eyes and whispered, "They lied to us." Meanwhile, far below the city, Garen sat in a holding cell made of transparent walls. It wasn't a cruel prison, just a room meant to isolate and observe. Aurelian scientists had visited him earlier, asking endless questions. He answered politely, but they treated him like an experiment. They didn't see the human behind the armor. He sat quietly now, his sword placed beside him. When the guards left, he stared at the weapon for a long time, his mind drifting to old memories. Friends lost, battles fought, promises made. So many years had passed since Earth had burned, but his purpose had not changed. He had made an oath, and even if no one remembered it, he would keep it. Then the lights flickered. A soft alarm began to hum through the hall. Garen stood alert instantly. He recognized the sound, not a test alarm. That was a war signal. Up in the tower, Lysera's console flashed red. The message from orbit came through. Unidentified fleet entering Oralis space. The symbol scrolling across the screen made her heart freeze. She knew that emblem, the Kier Dominion. They were known for conquering weak worlds. The peace-loving Aurelians had no army to stop them. Outside, explosions of light flashed in the sky as the first enemy ships entered the atmosphere. The city's defense grid tried to activate, but centuries of disuse made it slow and weak. Energy blasts tore through the outer platforms. People ran through the streets in panic. Lysera's first thought wasn't for herself. It was for Garen. She raced through the trembling corridors toward the detention wing. Smoke filled the air as alarms wailed. Guards were shouting orders, trying to evacuate. The floor shook beneath her feet. When she reached the holding area, the guards were gone. The energy doors flickered in and out. Garen was still inside, standing calmly, his eyes watching the chaos above through the ceiling vents. "Garen," she shouted. He turned, his expression unreadable. "I guessed it wouldn't stay peaceful forever." She hit the control panel, trying to override the lock, but the system was damaged. Sparks flew from the screen. "It won't open," she cried. Garen picked up his sword, stepped back and struck once. The energy barrier shattered with a sharp burst of light. He stepped through, brushing dust from his armor. "Your people need you," he said simply. Lysera looked at him wide-eyed. "You're not going to run?" He shook his head. "Not my way." Outside, the city shook again. The Kier fleet descended, releasing attack drones. The sky turned red with streaks of fire. Garen and Lysera ran through the corridors toward the upper levels. When they emerged onto the outer platform, the view took her breath away. Warships hovering low, their cannons glowing. The Oralis defense ships, few and fragile, were already falling. Garen looked at the sight and muttered, "So this is what peace without preparation looks like." He turned to Lysera. "Get to the evacuation pods. Help the civilians. What about you?" "I'll buy you time." She shook her head. "No, you can't fight an army alone." He smiled faintly. "You said that once before." He stepped forward, his figure framed against the burning sky. The sword hummed softly as he unsheathed it, the faint heat of metal cutting through the cold air. Lysera felt a lump rise in her throat. He wasn't walking to his death. He was walking toward his purpose. The first wave of enemy drones descended. Garen moved like wind and thunder, precise and controlled. Every motion was efficient, blocking, cutting, striking, not with rage but with focus. Sparks flew as machines fell around him. He was a blur of light and determination. Lysera watched in awe and terror. Every move told a story older than her world. Humanity's story, a will that refused to break. Soon ground troops landed. Garen fought them too, using cover, redirecting fire, protecting those who fled behind him. His voice carried through the smoke. "Get to the shelters, move." People obeyed, their fear turning into trust. Lysera joined the evacuation lines, guiding families and children toward the safe tunnels. But every few moments she looked back. He was still standing. When she reached the tunnel entrance, a deafening blast hit the council tower. The upper half of the structure collapsed in flames. Lysera's eyes widened. The chancellor and most of the council were gone. The city was leaderless. She turned to a group of guards. "Follow me," she shouted. "We help him." They hesitated, then nodded. The sight of the human warrior fighting alone had stirred something inside them, something old and fierce. Together they rushed back toward the battle. When they reached Garen, he was surrounded, his armor cracked and scorched again. But he still stood tall. Lysera shouted his name, and he turned, relief flickering in his eyes. "Good," he said between breaths. "You came." She held up a small control pad. "I found a way to overload the city's defense grid. It'll create a barrier for evacuation. But someone has to activate it manually." He nodded once. "Then I'll hold them while you do." Lysera hesitated. "You can't fight forever." He smiled softly. "Maybe not, but long enough." The sky above them was burning, the city trembling under the enemy assault. But for the first time in centuries, the people of Oralis weren't running. They were watching a single human stand in the storm, and they began to fight beside him. And as Lysera ran toward the control core, her heart pounded. Not Lysera didn't care. "If it saves them," she muttered, "then do it." Outside, Garen fought on the outer platform, his movements slower now but still precise. The guards around him fired at the advancing Kier troops holding the line. For every enemy that fell, 2 more replaced it. Garen's voice cut through the noise, calm and strong. "Hold your ground. Protect each other." A blast hit nearby, throwing dust and metal across the air. One guard stumbled. Garen caught him and pushed him back toward cover. "Stay up, soldier," he said firmly. "You're not done yet." The man nodded, shaking but alive. Garen turned back to the front. His sword glowed faintly again, not from energy but from heat and motion. The air around him shimmered with tension. For a brief moment the enemy hesitated. Even machines could sense something powerful in that stance. The quiet will of a man who refused to fall. Lysera's voice came through the comms, shaking but clear. "Garen, I'm in the chamber. I can activate the barrier. but the surge will destroy the tower. You need to get out now. He looked up toward the high spire where she was. No, he said calmly. Do it. But, Lysra, listen to me, he interrupted gently. You have people to save. I'm just finishing what we started long ago. Her throat tightened. You'll die if you stay there. He smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. Then I'll do what every human promised, to stand where others can't. Tears filled her eyes, but she pressed the final command. The system roared to life. Energy surged through the city's old network, lighting every tower and street. Bright lines of blue light spread across the sky like veins of lightning, forming a dome above the capital. The invading ships fired again, but their blasts struck the barrier and scattered into harmless sparks. The Kier fleet began to retreat, their scanners detecting massive energy buildup from below. Down on the ground, Garen felt the vibration beneath his feet. The grid was alive. He looked around at the guards beside him. Some were staring up at the glowing sky in disbelief. You did it, one whispered. Garen nodded slowly. No, he said quietly. She did, but the activation had another cost. The energy lines around the tower began to overload. The walls cracked and waves of white light burst from the ground. Garen looked up once more toward the control spire. Through the smoke, he thought he saw Lysra standing at the window watching him. He raised his sword in salute. The light grew brighter, surrounding everything. For a moment, time seemed to stop. When the blast finally settled, the sky over Oralis was clear again. The Kier fleet was gone. The city's barrier shimmered faintly but held strong. Fires burned quietly in the distance, but the people had survived. Lysra awoke hours later in the infirmary. Her body ached and her vision was blurry. The first thing she saw was the soft blue glow of the medical dome above her. A young guard stood nearby, smiling with relief. You're awake, he said. Her voice was weak. Garen? The guard looked down. We found no trace of him. Just this. He held out a metal object wrapped in cloth. When she took it and opened the fabric, she saw Garen's sword. Its surface blackened, the emblem of the last regiment still faintly visible. Lysra's eyes filled with tears. She held the sword close to her chest. He stayed, she whispered. He really stayed. News spread quickly across Oralis. The human warrior had saved their world. No one called him a monster anymore. The council chamber was rebuilt, and Lysra stood before them once more. This time there was no fear in their eyes, only silence and respect. She placed the sword on the center table. This, she said softly, is what you were afraid of. Not destruction, courage. Humanity didn't vanish. It simply waited for someone to remember. The Chancellor nodded slowly. He gave his life for a world that was not his own. Lysra looked at the shining city through the tall glass walls. That's what humans do. They fight for others even when no one asks. Weeks passed. The city healed. The people rebuilt. But Lysra couldn't shake the feeling that Garen's story wasn't over. Sometimes, late at night, she walked to the edge of the restored barrier, looking up at the stars, and one night, she saw it, a faint signal blinking in the distance. The same ancient code she had found before, 3 short pulses, 1 long, a human distress beacon. Lysra smiled through her tears. You're out there, aren't you? She whispered. She turned and walked back toward her ship. The story of humanity had not ended. It had only begun again, with one scholar who believed, and one soldier who kept his promise. As she lifted off into the quiet sky, the sword of Garen Hale rested beside her, shining faintly in the light of a new dawn, and across the stars worlds whispered the same words once more. Hold the line.